Well, before I begin, I just want to say Happy Mother's Day. Special thank you and celebration to all the mothers in the room. Of course, motherhood comes in a lot of different ways. We've got our biological mothers, of course, stepmothers, adoptive mothers, foster mothers, even spiritual mothers. So thank you to all the women that make sacrifices for our children. Also, just a little word of condolence to anyone that may be grieving today. Sometimes this day can be difficult for those that might be grieving due to infertility, or due to miscarriage, or the loss of a child, or even the loss of a mother, or maybe a bad relationship with your child or with your mother. So for all these reasons, we just want to be sensitive for those maybe in the room or in our life that also have that some grief in their heart. And just a reminder that Christ is the King of Peace, and He's the King of Kings and the healer, no matter what we may be facing. So, in summary, Happy Mother's Day to all, and I hope it's a great day. Now, no one was expecting an American Pope, and he named himself after us. He made a good choice. We are a pretty rockin' parish, so, you know. And I'm just going to address the elephant in the room, because people have been trying to ask me this question all week. Is he going to be a liberal pope or a conservative pope? And what I want to say is that Christ transcends politics. And we need a pope that transcends politics. Now, certainly there's political significance because he's a world figure. But ultimately, the Pope, the bishops, the priests, and quite frankly, you as well, all Christians should be an image of Christ first, and then bring that into whatever political situation we may find ourselves. And I'm very encouraged by Pope Leo because of the first words in the first couple of days that he has had. Because what he has made pretty clear in the beginning is that he is not talking political strategy. He's not talking business strategy. He's not even sharing certain management philosophies. He's speaking Christ. And that's really exciting, and I think really hopeful for us as a church. His first words to us, whenever he gave his first address and his first blessing, were, "Peace be with you all." And he acknowledges that this is the words of the risen Christ when he appears to his disciples. And he goes on to reflect a little bit about peace. He says, "It is the peace of the risen Christ, unarmed and disarming, humble and persevering." And he goes on to explain, this is the peace that he desires to share, that we can enter in. And he reflects on the mystery of the church, that the church is a beacon, not because of her buildings, but because of the holiness of her members. Putting first things first for us, reorienting our minds and our hearts, that this whole thing is about Christ. And as we reflect on peace, particularly as we reflect on peace through the biblical lens, we see that peace is not just comfort. It's not just the absence of conflict either. Instead, peace is having Christ at the center of our life. And that comes through sacrifice. And it's fitting and really providential that, the first weekend of his papacy is what we know as Good Shepherd Sunday. The fourth Sunday of Easter is always called Good Shepherd Sunday because we read from the gospel this passage where Jesus reflects on his identity as a good shepherd. And this is really an image of Christ that is very peaceful for us. That a shepherd is one who guards and protects, but also provides, and does so primarily through his sacrifice. He does it primarily through laying down his life, and Christ makes that explicit for us by saying the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. On the night before Jesus died, as he's sharing a meal with his apostles, he tells them, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you." And what he was referring to was that he's not going to give you a peace like the world tries to do by being a people pleaser or by being so powerful that you can crush all the people that disagree with you. Instead, he's going to give peace, how? Through crucifixion. By willingly laying down his life as a gift of love for you and me. And Pope Leo reflects on this mystery during his first homily with the cardinals the day after he was elected. And he quotes St. Ignatius of Antioch, who is one of the early church bishops and early church martyrs, who was martyred for his faith in Rome at a time whenever Christianity was not very popular. And St. Ignatius recognized that he was probably soon going to die because of his faith. And as he's preparing his people for that moment and preaching to them, he tells them, "Only then will I truly be a disciple of Jesus Christ, when the world no longer sees my body." You gotta love the courage of the early church martyrs. St. Ignatius of Antioch knew that what it means to be a disciple of Christ is to lay down your life every single day so that if the moment comes where it is your literal life that may be taken from you, you do so willingly in faith and fidelity to Jesus Christ. And so Pope Leo reflects on this and mentions that this is also the posture for church leaders, especially. He says that church leaders must move aside so that Christ may remain, to make oneself small so that he may be known, so that Christ may be known and glorified. I find this very encouraging, that he's starting off his papacy with this theme of peace. And he's been giving these little nods, he's been quoting different popes of the recent years as a way to almost kind of integrate and bring together all that's happened over the past couple of decades. He's seeking to be a peacemaker, particularly through union with Christ. Today's Good Shepherd Sunday, and so of course we want to pray that Pope Leo becomes and is and leads as a good shepherd. But it's also a day that we want to reflect on priestly vocations. It's something that we don't talk about a whole lot, or I guess I confess I don't talk about a whole lot from the pulpit for whatever reason. It's not intentional, but we do need good priests. We need good shepherds. And the thing about the priestly vocation, it's very mysterious, right? Because although we have vocations directors and, people that may encourage others to think about priesthood, ultimately the vocation of the priesthood doesn't come by recruitment. It comes as a calling. God calls mysteriously some men and not other men. And the personalities and skill sets and backgrounds vary. But the one thing that these vocations have in common is that they are men who heard the voice of the Lord, who listened to the voice of the Lord, and the Lord called. And we need men like that to lead our church, as priests, as bishops, and certainly as a pope. We want peaceful shepherds. And a peaceful shepherd is one who will be humble, one who will be prayerful, and one who will be sacrificial, who will lay down his life on a daily basis for the good of his people and the good of God's glory and the good of the church. In a word, we could say we need our shepherds to be invisible so that Christ can be visible in them and through them. So we want to pray for young men, because every man who's not married should at least ask the question. Most men won't be called, because most men were called to marriage. But we should all be open, because you just never know when Christ may call. And if we want that to happen, if we want young men to hear the voice of the Lord when he calls, it really starts with us, every single one of you in this room, to cultivate a listening, prayerful posture. That's how we can help. We all should be listening to the voice of the Lord in our life, because he doesn't just speak about vocations. He speaks about everything going on in your life. He speaks about your suffering. He speaks about your challenges. He speaks about your joys and your happiness and your relationships with your family, with your friends, in the workplace. The Lord speaks every day, but how many of us don't hear him? How many of us don't even try to hear him? But what if we cultivated a culture of listening to the Lord? A culture that desired to hear the Lord speak. A culture that, upon hearing the Lord's voice, followed him, took a risk for the Lord, faced our fears with the Lord on our side. A culture like that will probably produce more vocations. I'll end with this. Pope Leo is not only the first American pope, but the first pope to be from the Augustinian order, which is a religious order after the charism in mind and heart of St. Augustine, one of our great saints in the history of the church. St. Augustine has plenty to say, and it's all very beautiful, but one of the things that St. Augustine is known to say is a definition for peace. And so since this kind of seems to be a theme, at least in the first couple of days of Pope Leo, I thought it'd be fitting to recall the words of St. Augustine, who says that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the tranquility of order. What does that mean? It almost sounded inspiring until I finished my punchline. It's like, wait, hold on. I was ready for that to be good, but now I'm confused. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the tranquility of order. What he means, the tranquility of order, is to have an ordered heart, to put your life in order. Well, how do we do that? To put Christ at the center. Now it's ordered. And then to put your closest relationships first after that, your spouse, your kids, your parents. And then to figure out how to integrate your faith and your fidelity to Christ with everything else in your life, including and not limited to the workplace and your leisure activities and your downtime and the media that you consume and the conversations that you engage in, etc. But there's a tranquility that happens whenever we put Christ at the center of our life. And many of you know what this feels like. You've experienced it in your life, where life before that moment, whenever you put Christ at the center, before that, maybe your life was a wreck. And your heart was a wreck. And then maybe you encountered the love of Christ and things changed. And maybe your life is still difficult and challenging, but your heart's different. There's a tranquility of order by putting Christ at the center. And if we want peace in the world, it starts with peace in our hearts, which starts with Christ. Which is why I'm so encouraged, at least by these first couple of days, of the words of Pope Leo XIV. So we pray that his pontificate is one of peace, and that he models for us the peace of Christ, so that we too can be witnesses of Christ's peace to a world that is greatly distressed. Amen. Hey guys, thanks again for listening to our podcast. Don't forget to click the links below to learn more about our mission. Thanks.